Someone commented that they remember the winter of 1966. 43 inches in Syracuse, in a single storm. If you remember that winter, you've got perspective that most people don't have. You know what real winter looks like. You know what it's like when snow just doesn't stop. Another person mentioned 1993, another mentioned 2017. These are the winters that become markers. The ones that people measure all other winters against. The ones that get talked about decades later. So when I tell you that this current pattern has the potential to become one of those memorable winters, I need you to understand I'm not being dramatic. I'm being analytical. I'm looking at the atmospheric setup, I'm looking at the historical data, and I'm seeing patterns that look familiar if you know where to look. Let me start by asking you to comment your city and state if you're watching. I'm creating custom forecasts for the 100 most commented locations, and having that geographic information helps me provide details that are actually relevant to where you are. Now, for those of you who've been watching weather for 40, 50, 60 years, you know that certain atmospheric patterns produce certain types of winter weather. You know that when the jet stream sets up in a certain configuration, you're going to get lake effect. You know that blocking patterns mean persistent cold. You know how to read the signs. What we have right now is a textbook blocking pattern. High pressure positioned over Greenland and the North Atlantic, low pressure spinning over eastern Canada, unable to move. If you were looking at this on a weather map in 1978 or in 1996 or in 2014, you'd recognize it immediately. This is the kind of setup that produces extended periods of cold and snow for the eastern United States. The difference between a forgettable winter and a memorable winter often comes down to persistence. One big snowstorm makes the news for a day or two, but when the snow keeps coming day after day after day, that's when it becomes a winter people remember. That's when accumulation totals go from impressive to historic. That's when even people who are used to snow start to feel overwhelmed. That's where we are right now. This isn't a single storm, this is a pattern, and the pattern is forecast to persist for at least another week, possibly longer. Let me walk you through what the atmospheric setup looks like and why it matters. We have what's called a negative Arctic oscillation. The Arctic oscillation, or AO, is an index that measures the state of atmospheric circulation around the North Pole. When it's negative, it means the polar vortex is weak and displaced. Arctic air that would normally be bottled up over the North Pole instead spills southward into the mid-latitudes. That's what's happening right now. We also have what's called a negative North Atlantic oscillation, or NAO. The NAO measures the pressure difference between Iceland and the Azores. When it's negative, we get blocking patterns over the North Atlantic and Greenland. Those blocks prevent weather systems from moving through normally. They create traffic jams in the atmosphere. When you get a negative AO and a negative NAO at the same time, which is what we have right now, you get prolonged periods of cold for the eastern United States. You get storm systems that move slowly or stall out entirely. You get lake effect that just keeps producing snow because the wind direction and temperature profile stay favorable. If you look back at the historic winters, the ones that people still talk about decades later, you'll find that most of them featured negative AO and negative NAO patterns. The winter of 1977 to 78, one of the coldest and snowiest on record for the eastern US, featured strongly negative values of both. The winter of 2013 to 2014, which brought the polar vortex into popular consciousness, also featured these patterns. I'm not saying this winter is going to be exactly like those winters. Every winter is unique. But I am saying the atmospheric setup is similar. And when you see similar atmospheric setups, you get similar weather outcomes. Now, let me get specific about what's happening with the lake effect, because understanding the mechanism helps you understand why this is so persistent. Lake effect snow requires 3 ingredients. You need cold air, you need relatively warm water, and you need the right wind direction to carry that air across the lake. Right now, we have all 3 ingredients, and they're all at the upper end of their typical ranges. The air mass over us originated in the high Arctic. This is air that was sitting over northern Canada and Alaska just a few days ago. When air like that flows south across the Great Lakes, which haven't frozen over yet and are still relatively warm, the temperature contrast is enormous. Air temperatures in the low teens flowing over water temperatures in the low 40s. That's a 25 to 30 degree temperature difference, which is huge. The greater the temperature difference, the more intense the lake effect. The wind direction is also nearly perfect for lake effect. Northwest winds are flowing across Lake Erie, Lake Ontario, and Lake Huron at speeds of 30 to 40 miles per hour. That's the sweet spot. Too slow and you don't get enough moisture pickup. Too fast and the air doesn't have time to saturate with moisture before it reaches land. 30 to 40 miles per hour is right in the ideal range. The wind direction is also creating what we call fetch, which is the distance the air travels over open water. The longer the fetch, the more moisture the air picks up. Right now, places like Buffalo, Syracuse, Watertown, and Erie are positioned perfectly to receive maximum fetch. The air is traveling the full length of the lake before hitting land. And we're seeing double fetch in some locations where air crosses Lake Huron, picks up moisture, then crosses Lake Erie, picks up even more moisture, then continues to Lake Ontario and picks up additional moisture before finally dumping it all as snow. That's why some locations are looking at 2 to 4 feet of total accumulation. For comparison, let's look at some historic lake effect events. In November of 2014, Buffalo received 7 feet of snow in 3 days from a single lake effect event. That was extraordinary even by Buffalo standards. In January of 1977, Buffalo received over 10 feet of snow for the entire month, much of it from persistent lake effect. In December of 2001, Buffalo received over 7 feet of snow in a 5-day period. What we're seeing right now isn't quite at those levels, but it's in the same ballpark. We're talking about multiple feet of snow over multiple days. For areas that get lake effect regularly, this is significant. For areas that don't normally see this kind of snow, this is potentially catastrophic. Someone commented that 11 inches is a normal snow day in Syracuse. They're absolutely right. Syracuse averages over 120 inches of snow per winter, which makes it one of the snowiest cities in the United States. So, when I tell Syracuse residents that you're getting another foot of snow, I know you're not panicking. You're experienced. You know how to handle it. But here's what I need even the experienced people to understand. Familiarity breeds complacency. And complacency in winter weather can get you killed. Yesterday in Iowa, someone died in a 14-car pileup during a snowstorm. I guarantee you that person had driven in snow before, probably hundreds of times. But all it takes is one moment of reduced visibility, one patch of ice you didn't see, one car in front of you that stops suddenly, and experience doesn't matter anymore. In Michigan, a semi-truck went off an overpass and burst into flames during whiteout conditions. Professional truck drivers have more winter driving experience than almost anyone. But even professionals can't drive safely when visibility is zero. The point is, respect the conditions even if you're experienced, maybe especially if you're experienced, because experienced people are the ones most likely to think they can handle it when they shouldn't be driving at all. Now let me talk about what we can expect going forward, both in the short term and over the next few weeks. Short term, this lake effect pattern continues through at least the end of this week. The blocking pattern shows no signs of breaking down before the weekend at the earliest, possibly extending into early next week. That means multiple days of continuous snow for areas in the lake effect zones. Accumulations will continue to pile up. Roads will remain difficult to impassable. Travel will remain dangerous. The cold will persist as well. High temperatures are going to struggle to get into the 20s for most of the Northeast and Great Lakes. Overnight lows will be in the single digits in many areas. When you factor in the wind, we're looking at wind chills consistently below zero, reaching -10 to -20 in some locations. This is the kind of cold where exposed skin can get frostbite in under 10 minutes. Medium term, once this blocking pattern finally breaks down, probably sometime next week, we're going to see a significant shift in the overall pattern. The jet stream is going to amplify, creating a deep trough in the eastern U.S. and a strong ridge in the west. That pattern typically brings storm after storm through the eastern states. What kind of storms depends on the temperature profile. If it's cold enough, we see snow. If temperatures are marginal, we see ice. If it's too warm for frozen precipitation, we see rain and potentially severe weather. Given that we're in early January, the odds favor snow and ice for most areas. For areas that haven't seen much winter yet this season, this pattern change could bring your first significant winter weather. Texas, Louisiana, Arkansas, Oklahoma, Tennessee, Kentucky, you're all in the potential impact zone depending on how individual storms track. Long term, and I'm talking about the rest of January and into February, the overall pattern looks active. When you have strongly negative AO and NAO values like we're seeing now, they tend to persist for weeks at a time. The atmosphere doesn't flip from negative to positive overnight. It transitions gradually. What that means practically is that once we get into this pattern of frequent storms and persistent cold, we're likely to stay in it for a while. Not every single day will be stormy or brutally cold, but the overall flavor of the pattern will remain winter dominant. This is the kind of pattern where, by the end of January, you're looking at seasonal snowfall totals that are well above average. This is the kind of pattern where people in their 80s and 90s say this reminds me of the old days. This is the kind of pattern that produces a winter people remember. Now, someone asked about climate change and whether this kind of winter is still possible in a warming world. It's a fair question and deserves a thoughtful answer. Yes, the planet is warming on average. Yes, winters are generally becoming milder over time, but that doesn't mean cold winters don't happen anymore. The Arctic is warming faster than the mid-latitudes, which actually makes the polar vortex less stable. When it's less stable, it's more likely to meander or split, which can send pulses of Arctic air southward. So, in a paradoxical way, Arctic warming might actually make extreme winter weather more likely in the mid-latitudes, even as average temperatures rise. It doesn't happen every year, but when the conditions line up, you can still get winters that are as cold and snowy as anything from decades past. The difference is these winters are less frequent than they used to be. In the 1960s and 70s, you might get a harsh winter like this every other year. Now you might get one every 5 or 10 years, but when they do occur, they're just as intense as they ever were. Let me talk about practical preparation, because understanding the forecast is only useful if you act on it. If you're in the heavy lake effect zones, you should already be stocked up on supplies. If you're not, do it today. Don't wait until tomorrow. Food that doesn't require cooking, water, medications, batteries, flashlights, everything you need for at least 3 days of being snowed in. Check your heating system. Make sure it's working properly. If you have a fireplace or wood stove, make sure you have plenty of firewood and that your chimney is clear. If you have a generator, test it now to make sure it runs. Make sure you have fuel for it. Prepare your vehicles. Full tank of gas. Emergency kit including blankets, food, water, shovel, sand or kitty litter, flashlight, first aid kit. If you're going to drive at all, which I recommend against, you need to be prepared for the possibility of getting stuck. Check on vulnerable people in your life, elderly neighbors, people who live alone, people with medical conditions. Make sure they're prepared, make sure they have what they need. Offer to help if they don't. And most importantly, make smart decisions about travel. Unless it's truly an emergency, stay home. No job, no appointment, no social engagement is worth your life. Roads are going to be terrible. Visibility is going to be near zero at times. Even if you're an experienced winter driver, these are conditions where experience doesn't guarantee safety. Someone made an excellent point in the comments about workplace policies. They said truckers should be given deadline leeway when roads are bad, and people should be able to stay home from work without penalty because it's not worth somebody's life. That's absolutely right. Employers need to be reasonable about this. The work will still be there when the storm passes. But if someone dies trying to get to work, they're not coming back. Let me share something from a historical perspective that I think is relevant. In the winter of 1977 to 78, which was one of the coldest and snowiest winters on record for the eastern U.S., there were extended periods where life just stopped. Schools were closed for weeks at a time, businesses shut down. People couldn't get to work even if they wanted to. But communities adapted. Neighbors helped neighbors. People checked on each other. Those with four-wheel drive vehicles helped those who were stuck. Those with generators shared power. Those with food shared with those who ran out. And everyone got through it together. That's the spirit I'm hoping we can tap into with this storm. Yes, it's going to be difficult. Yes, it's going to be inconvenient. Yes, some of us are going to be snowed in for days. But we've been through this before. We know how to handle it, and we're going to get through it again. Someone shared a Bible verse in the comments, 1 Peter chapter 5, verses 8 through 11. Be sober, be vigilant, because your adversary, the devil, as a roaring lion, walketh about seeking whom he may devour. But the God of all grace, who hath called us unto his eternal glory by Christ Jesus, after that ye have suffered a while, make you perfect, establish, strengthen, settle you. That's good wisdom for winter weather. Be sober and vigilant means be prepared and aware. Don't be complacent, but also trust that suffering is temporary. Winter doesn't last forever. This storm will pass, and we'll be okay. Before I close, I want to ask a few things that would help both you and your community. If you found this forecast valuable, please click the like button. That helps the algorithm show this to more people in your area who might need it. If you haven't subscribed yet, please consider it. This pattern is going to continue evolving, and I'll be posting regular updates. Turn on notifications so you get immediate alerts if conditions change rapidly. And please share this with people who might need it. Information only helps if people actually see it. Here's what you need to remember. This is a significant winter weather event that's going to persist for days. Lake effect snow will continue producing heavy accumulation in favored areas. Cold will be brutal and dangerous. Travel will be hazardous to impossible. If you're experienced with winter, I respect that, but don't let experience make you careless. If you're not experienced with this kind of winter, listen to the people who are. Their knowledge could keep you safe. A major pattern change is coming that will bring more storms throughout January. This is just the beginning of what looks like an active winter. Stay informed, stay prepared, stay safe, and take care of each other. To those of you dealing with this right now, you have my respect and my thoughts. You're tough, you're resilient, you're going to get through this. God bless you all. Stay warm, stay safe, and I'll see you in the next update as this situation continues to develop.